Cloud. Okay, sounds good. All right, Newton, take.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Newton, and today we'll be going over how to deploy APIs on Heroku. And if we have time at the end, we'll also kind of work with the Twilio API. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So this is a really short presentation. We'll spend most of our time like actually coding, but just for like new members or like if you're new to programming, what exactly is an API? This is a very simplified definition. So if you know what an API is, it's going to sound really ridiculous, but it's essentially like a special website that programs can access, and it can be used to send or receive data, which is typically in JSON format, which we'll be kind of working with as well. And it allows developers to write programs to interact with online services and websites. So you probably heard of like Twilio API. So they have like a special endpoint that we can, access for us to send like text messages or like make voice calls. And these are some like additional other examples of APIs, like the Spotify API. You can get like an artist's albums and their tracks, their songs. You can use the Twitter API to like tweet from a bot account. You can use a Discord API to create a bot, and like the Yelp API to find like all the boba places in Los Angeles. So today what we'll be doing is we'll be building our own API. So why would you want to build your own API? So typically it's because you have like some special project that requires like some specialized need. So you'll essentially build your own website where you'll send your own data to it. And then how you process that data is also kind of specialized. Like the Google API might not necessarily do what exactly like it is that you need to do. So you write your own API to kind of interface between everything that you need. So it's a very specialized thing to do. And there's a lot of custom functionality that you can add to it. But we'll essentially be building a very simple API that will take in like JSON requests, and then we'll kind of go over that as well. So this is like a diagram of what we'll be building. So we'll be building our our API in Node.js, which is just JavaScript. And if you don't know JavaScript, it's very similar to like most programming languages, except it does have like some really quirky features that we won't really go over, but you'll see. And then yeah, we'll be using Express, which is a framework to develop our app. And then after we develop like a really simple app, and then testing it locally, so in our development environment on our local computer, we're going to version control on GitHub, and then we're going to deploy it on Heroku. So once we have it working on Heroku, then we'll take a look to see how we can kind of integrate the Twilio API in our own website. So yeah, so before we start, there are a few things that we need to get set up. The first thing is make sure you have Node.js installed on your computer. And when you install Node.js, you get npm, which is the Node package manager. And then your favorite text editor, so what you'll be coding in. And then make sure you have a way to use Git, either using like the command line or using GitHub Desktop. And then make sure you have a GitHub account and a Heroku account. So yeah, thanks Jenny for sharing that link. Okay, so the first thing we'll want to do is actually create our Git repo first. So if you go on GitHub/new and then just kind of create a new repository, you can either make it public or private. I'll go over how to securely store API keys. So it's okay if it's public, but just make sure when you do commit, you don't commit anything sensitive. So I'll just be calling this Makers API, and then I'll be like, this is the demo for Makers API tutorial. And then what might help us is if we add a git ignore file and then type in Node.js, just type in Node and click on this. And what this will do is it will create a repository for us with just the git ignore specialized for Node. And then we can go from there. Does anybody have any questions so far? So yeah, if you've used GitHub, I'm sure you know what this is. But if you've never kind of created your own repository, this might be a bit new to you.
Can you just wait like 2 minutes just so people can finish up? Like
yeah, no problem. And then yeah, I'll kind of explain like what's going on as we kind of work through this. Yeah, this is a pretty important step. just so we don't have to create our own git ignore file, just to add .git ignore as a node. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna click create repository, and then in a few seconds, it's gonna give me an empty repository with just a single file. So it's not actually empty. I have a git ignore file. If we take a look at that, these are all the files that basically won't be version controlled by Git, which means that if we make changes to our code base, there are certain files that we don't necessarily want to keep track of because of like either they're very large or they're like binary files. And then those files are listed in this file right here, git ignore. So Git will ignore all of these files.
It won't let me create the repository for some reason. Like the button is grayed out.
Did you name your repository?
I think
Yeah.
we need to select node. That just happened for me, but make the git ignore select node.
Oh,
Oh, you mean
yep,
this?
you're right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I didn't know that was the thing. Oh, yeah, you have to select node. Sorry, that was my bad. And then, yeah, make sure you provide a name and then it will on-gray out. Okay, so once we have this repository, let me actually share my full screen. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Like my entire screen. Okay, so to clone your repository, if you've ever done this before, I'm sure you know how to do this. But go into, click on code, this green button up here, and then copy this URL. You can use either HTTPS or SSH. If you have two-factor authentication enabled, you have to use SSH. I don't think HTTPS will work. So yeah, we basically just want to clone this onto our desktop. So I'm just gonna open up my terminal, cd into my desktop. And then the way we do that is make sure this is copied. Just type in git clone and then paste in this URL. And then when I hit enter, it's going to clone into Makers API, which is what I named my repository. And then if I take a look at my desktop, I'll have this folder, and basically this is my entire folder. So yeah, if you do create the repository on GitHub first, it does save you a bit of hassle than if you kind of created the repository on your computer, because you have to like set up the remote repository, and then like that is there's a bit of work to that, but like if you just do it from here, this is a pretty convenient way. And then yeah, so make sure you clone the repository onto your desktop, and then I'm gonna open this in VS Code, which is my text editor, but basically open this in any text editor that you normally use. And then you'll see it's empty, and that's what we're looking for. And then VS Code has an integrated terminal, but this is essentially a terminal app that's built into VS Code. So if you're not using VS Code, you can just use a separate terminal app. Just make sure you're CD'd into the Makers API folder for when we have to run commands. But yeah, VS Code does come with like an integrated terminal. So these two things are basically the same. Does anybody need more time to get to this step?
I don't know how you opened VS Code with nothing. Well, I had to open it in the git ignore, but I think that's fine.
Make sure you drag the entire folder into Visual Studio, to VS Code. So the benefit of having the entire folder is that you can kind of see. So if I just kind of close it, I open up an empty window. So this is completely blank, and I drag the folder in. It'll open up the directory. So the benefit of doing this is that you can kind of see all your files on the left. So there's no kind of ambiguity as to what folders you're editing, because a really common issue if you do try to open like individual files all over the place is that sometimes you might open a file, like you don't know which file you're changing. Like you might be changing a file from another project because you can't really keep track of that. So having this directory open here is a pretty convenient way to just have everything there, and like there's no ambiguity as to what files you're editing. And yeah, thanks Anjali for posting that. Yeah, you will have, there is like, if code and then dot doesn't work for you, you could also just try to drag and drop it into your text editor. I think you can install, like there is a way to set it up by typing in code, and then yeah, there's a shell command here that installs code to your path. So yeah, if you don't have code in your path, that might not work. But yeah, does anybody need more time to get this set up? If not, we can kind of move on. So we're going to actually start building our Express app now, because that's basically what we're here for. And npm is the package manager that Node gives you. And then let me actually open up the npm website. And one thing I love about JavaScript that a lot of people might not, a lot of people might not love JavaScript, but the one thing I love about it is that the ecosystem is like, extremely rich. There's like a ton of different libraries that people write for it. And it just has this really rich ecosystem that you can just find a lot of stuff with. So let me open this. Yeah, I love JavaScript. I've changed. Like once you start using Node, it's so amazing. Like I could look up like a Discord, for example. Like it doesn't even have to be a website, but like you can code an entire Discord bot using Discord JS, which is basically like an abstraction of the Discord library. And then like this is as simple as it gets. You just copy and paste this example code, paste in your token, and you have a Discord bot. Like it's just that easy. But yeah, the ecosystem's like really, really rich. So there's like basically stuff for everything. And basically if you want to like kind of look at libraries, you can just search for whatever you want. Like you can even do like IoT in this. Like Johnny 5 is kind of like you can use this like program Arduinos if you really wanted to. It's kind of insane. But so the one that we'll be using today is called Express. And they call it a minimalist web framework, and it's insanely popular. Like you can tell, like this week there's like almost 17 million downloads. And this is kind of like when people talk about like building web apps in Node.js, they typically talk about using Express, which is just a library that you use in Node.js. But yeah, just to kind of clarify, Node.js is kind of like a JavaScript runtime. So it lets you run JavaScript code on your computer, as opposed to using a browser to like run this code. So yeah, I guess people just really love using JavaScript. So yeah, I can tell people don't like JavaScript, and then I'll kind of explain why. There is a really good reason for it, but to install, so the first thing we want to do is actually init our repository to be an npm project. So if I open up my VS Code right now, I type in npm init, and then I'm just gonna do -y. If you don't do the -y, essentially what will happen is it'll ask you a bunch of different questions that you'll just end up clicking like yes to anyways. So -y will automatically set y to like yes to all those questions. Those questions kind of include like, what's your default version? Do you want a description? What's your main script? What's your name, for example? And then after running that command, you'll notice that you'll have this package.json file where all these details are kept. So whenever you see package.json, you can kind of assume that the directory you're working in is a Node project. It's npm init and then -y. Let me try to make this larger. This is a command. Just make sure you're in your Makers API directory when you run this. And then when you hit enter, it will, yeah, make sure you have Node installed as well before you run this. Okay, so now that we have this project, like Node project, let's create a new file. So I'm gonna go ahead and click new file. I'm gonna call this index.js. By convention, it's just, people just kind of call their main file index.js. And then really simple JavaScript syntax. To create a new variable, you can either use let or const. Let means it's mutable. So I can say like let mutable variable equal to 5, and then I can say like mutable variable equals to 6. This is something I can do with let. And then const is pretty self-explanatory. It just means like it's a constant variable, so you can't change it. More specifically, you can't change the reference. So that is a bit like, yeah, it is a bit weird if you use const, because you can actually technically use an array and still work on the array. But yeah, also, yeah, so const and let are relatively new. Before, like in the old school JavaScript, people just use var, but var is not good. Whenever you can, avoid var. Like, yeah, thanks Michael and Jenny for reminding me. Try not to use var. There really isn't a good reason to use it. And they've kind of been replaced. Like let and const are used much more preferable than just var. So yeah, whenever you can, just use let and const. Yeah, so this is how we define variables. But anyways, moving on, let's install Express. So the way we do that is we type in npm install Express. So type this in your terminal, and then if you hit enter, you'll see it's running this like download. And this is a big reason why people don't like JavaScript. This node modules folder is it's basically where it installs all your dependencies. So within your node project itself, all the dependencies that you need are all stored inside this node modules folder. So if I created another web project, for example, I'd have another node modules folder containing potentially the same number of dependency. Like this folder can be very, very large. So this is the reason why people don't really like Node, is because of this folder. And if I open this up, you'll notice that I installed more than just Express. I installed a lot of the dependencies that Express depends on, and then those dependencies, and then those dependencies, which is why there's so many files in here. But typically you don't want to look at this. Just kind of pretend it doesn't exist and make sure it's in your git ignore, because you don't want to push anything in this folder into your GitHub. And by default, it's already in your git ignore in node modules. Okay. Yeah, and yeah, thank you, Jenny. I'm having a hard time articulating, so it's good that you're writing all of that. Yeah, and you can use npm express to install if you want to save a fraction of a second. It's a pretty good alias to write as well. Okay, so this is how we create an Express app. We're going to create a new constant called express equals to require express. So this is just JavaScript syntax. Essentially what we're saying is we want to grab the express library and use it in this variable called express. And then the way we create an app is we have to instantialize this app and say app is equal to an instance of express. So this will actually create a new express app for us. So this here requires the library, and then app is just basically an instance of this library. And let's just get something up really quickly. Let's do app.listen, which basically means start this server. And we have to give it a port. So the port number, let's just use 3000, because a lot of web projects kind of default to 3000. And then what we can do is we can use an anonymous function. If you don't know what that is, don't worry too much. This is just part of JavaScript syntax that you kind of have to just accept. This is called an arrow function. Oh wait, actually, give me 1 second. Let me turn
You
off
make
my,
that arrow.
yeah, sorry. Let me turn off my ligatures. Whoops. Okay, yeah, this is what it's supposed to look like. Yeah, sorry, I have like fancy fonts, so that's why like symbols pop up. Oh yeah, package lot.json. So when you install something like Express, do you notice how there's no version attached to this Express version? Meaning you could be installing version 1, 2, 3, or 4 Express. This command here doesn't tell you. What package lock tells you though is for every single dependency in your node modules folder, it'll keep track of the version that you use, so that if you were to give your project to somebody else, this package lock.json file will tell their npm what versions of Express you need. So there's basically no ambiguity. Like every single one of your dependencies in node modules has their version tracked in package.json.lock, or sorry, package lock.json. And you will typically not edit this folder by yourself. This is completely managed by npm. So you just avoid touching this. npm will manage it by yourself. When you install new dependencies, it'll keep it updated. Package.json you can also kind of like work on, but yeah, you'll notice that our dependencies are added like down here as well. So yeah, this is more of like metadata for your project, and then package lock will tell you more information about the versions of your like every single one of your dependencies. And then yeah, thanks Jenny. So this is basically an anonymous function. If you don't know what that is, don't worry too much. Because there is a big reason why they did this, but you can kind of just assume, you can just kind of look at this as a normal function call that just doesn't have a name. But yeah, and it's used a lot in JavaScript, so you'll be seeing like this arrow notation a lot. And then this will start our server. So let's actually console.log. So console.log is how we print into this terminal window right here. So when we run our app, require, I think it's a little different. I think in C++, include will act, it's like a pre-compiler kind of, or pre-processor instruction. require is more of like a runtime. It's kind of different. Yeah, it's kind of different because we're actually requiring this specific library and then we're assigning it to a variable in our JavaScript. But anyways, we can just kind of move on. Let's just say like example app listening. Yeah, if you do have any more questions, I can try to get to them at the end. All right, app is listening. And then last thing we need to add is we have to add a route. The way we do that is in HTTP requests, there's two main types of routes. There are actually several more, but the two main ones you'll see are get and post route. So when you make an API request, usually the API will tell you, make a get request to this URL or make a post request to this URL. So for us to kind of enable that in our app, we have to also define those routes. So we can say app.get, and then this is our route. So let's say this is the root route. So basically when we access the main directory of our application, we want this function to run. And then this is just express syntax. I don't really want to go too much into like why we have to write it this way, because you'll just see this a lot. And at a certain point, you're just like, okay, I need, like whenever I create a new route in Express, this is just something I have to include. And then let's just console.log like in this route. And then we're making a get route here. So basically if we make get requests to like the main endpoint of our URL, we'll console.log this out right here. And then just to kind of show you what happens after is we can say response like res.send hello world. So what will happen is that when we start running this server, and we can actually do that right now, when we run this server, it'll create a website for us. When we access the root of this website, which is basically like the main page, nothing in the URL, just our website, it will console.log in this route in our console down here. And then it'll open this up in our web browser. So the way we do that is, let's actually open up package.json and then look for this thing called scripts. And then you'll notice that NPM kind of auto-generated this thing called test. We have to add one more thing. So right above test, let's add a key value pair where the key is start. And then make sure you add a comma at the end after the value. And it would just be node index.js. And then I'll kind of explain why we added this. It's because in our terminal, if we just run npm start now, it will automatically run node index.js. And then yeah, npm start is typically how you start your application. So yeah, we just want this. And then yeah, if we hit enter, you'll notice it says example app is listening, and it's not terminating, which means that this web server is actually running. And the way we access that is to go into our web browser, localhost 3000. Okay, so when I go into localhost 3000, notice whatever we typed in the res.send shows up in my browser. Yeah, Angela, it'll do the same thing. But the thing is, typically by convention, people will add it in our scripts because there's some cases where like this is more standardized to write npm start rather than node index.js, because this is node index.js is kind of a convention that we name our main files, but it's not always the case because sometimes we don't have an index.js. Sometimes we're writing a bot, right? And it might be called bot.js. So you just kind of include it in your package.json. So if you just run npm start, it's kind of agreed that this is how you start your application or your bot or your website. So yeah, it's the same thing, but this is kind of like the convention. But anyway, so if we go back to our website and I keep refreshing this, you'll notice that yeah, in route here,
my Chrome didn't open up the website for some reason.
Okay. Did you run npm start?
Yeah, I am npm started.
Does it say example app listening?
Yeah.
Did you add in the port number up here?
Yeah.
Could you check this syntax here on the app.get?
Yeah, looks fine to me.
Did you do a double quotes and then slash?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can take a look at it in a bit.
No problem.
But yeah, I'll just leave this up. make sure when you access your website, it's localhost and then :3000 for the port. Because that's the port that we defined on our app.
Oh, do you have to type that yourself?
Yeah, you have to type in :3000 yourself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did that. Okay, we're good. It's up.
Oof, sorry. Like, I realize I'm not the best at explaining things,
No, you're all good.
but yeah, I mean, just a comment in like the chat as well. So if there's anything that needs clarification, just feel free to ask. So is it working now with if you included the port? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So let's actually move on and deploy this on Heroku. Just because, just to get the pipeline set up. I think setting up the pipeline is really neat. So let's actually go on to Heroku.com. So what Heroku.com is it's just a platform for us to host our Node apps. And like basically everything that you create is here. You might not see anything if you've never used Heroku before. But once you log in, yeah, I'll give some time for people to make accounts if you need to. I'm sorry, I should have kind of mentioned this before we started. But yeah, make a Heroku account. It's owned by Salesforce. It's really popular for people learning Node to kind of actually deploy their applications on their websites or onto the internet. Because like working on local host is great and all, but if we want to send this to somebody, there's no way to do that. So Heroku lets us kind of deploy this on the internet. And on Heroku, let's click on new and then click on create new app. And we have to name our app, and we can kind of name it anything we want. It has to be unique, like globally unique, meaning if I name my app Makers API, nobody else can name it Makers API, Apparently somebody already used Makers API. So I'm going to type in my name, Newton Fu, Makers API, and hopefully nobody's used this before. All right, so once it's available, let's click on create app. Yeah, it doesn't matter what your primary language is. You can click on Node.js if you want, but it really doesn't have an effect. I think it's really more for their surveying purposes because the functionality is the same. And on Heroku, you can host more than just Node.js. Yeah, don't worry. I'll give everybody some time to create an account. And yeah, I apologize again. I should have went over this, or I should have kind of mentioned this before we started today. And then yeah, for people who already have Heroku accounts, again, I'll give some time for people to make accounts. Do find the button that allows you to connect your Heroku to your GitHub account so that we can kind of tie in a repository into Heroku. And then Heroku will basically handle all of that automation for us, like the deployment and everything for us. So yeah, name your app something unique and then click on create account. Or sorry, create app. Okay, once you do that, yeah, find where you need to like click on the button that connects your GitHub account. Right now I'm on deploy in this app, and then under deployment method, I have GitHub, which is connect to GitHub. If you haven't connected your GitHub, it might prompt you to, go into your GitHub login so that it can kind of use like a third-party app. And then just for convenience, you can click allow. And it does make the deployment easier. So yeah, do connect your GitHub account to your Heroku account. And then you should have this option once you're done, where it says connect to GitHub. So to search for a repository to connect to, make sure you're selected in your own account and then find your repository name. So I call this Makers API on GitHub. So I'm going to go here and search for Makers API. If I hit search, I find it here. And I'm going to click connect. One quick note is we haven't actually pushed anything. Like this repository is still empty. It still only just contains a git ignore. So our next step is to actually push all of our files onto this GitHub repository, and then Heroku will automatically deploy everything else for us. So yeah, first step is connect your GitHub account to your Heroku account. Second thing is make sure you add the correct repository onto Heroku using this dropdown box. So search for your repository. And finally, the third thing we want to do is click on enable automatic deploys. When you scroll down a bit, after you connect your repository, there's this gray button that we can click. And then now it will automatically deploy from our master or main branch onto our Heroku site. Okay, and there's one more thing we need to change on our code base. So let me go back to my code base. So for people who still need to write the code. Yeah, and thank you, Jenny. I appreciate you clarifying. Yeah, basically it kind of automates this process, which is, it makes things a lot easier. Okay, one more thing we need to change is so Heroku won't let us use port 3000. Heroku is kind of picky in what ports are available. In fact, Heroku will actually tell us what port we need to use. So we won't know what port that is until Heroku, until we run our application. So you just kind of have to accept this, but let's create a port variable. So const port is equal to process.env.port, and then or 3000. Okay, let me break down the syntax a little bit. This is saying, let's create a new variable called port, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's basically like, what port are we using, or what port are we hosting our web at? If port exists as an environmental variable, so basically if it's defined on the system that we're using, then use that value. But if it isn't defined, let's just default to 3000. So right now when we're running locally, this doesn't exist. Yeah, I'm very big on like picking my programming fonts. Yeah, I can enable ligatures later if people want to see it. It makes it really fancy. But anyways, yeah, so right now on our local computer, this environmental variable doesn't exist. So it's going to use 3000. But on Heroku, this will exist. Heroku will actually provide this value for us, and this value will be substituted with that value. And then this value will be, we'll use that. And then, yeah, we'll be using .env in a bit when we start using Twilio. But yeah, this here essentially is provided by Heroku. And we'll talk about environmental variables in a bit. So let's replace 3000 with our port variable right now. So yeah, make sure you replace line 11 with the word port instead of hard coding 3000. And then let's do npm start again, just to make sure everything's working. And once example app is listening, let's actually push everything onto our GitHub repository using git add -a, git commit, and then I'm just gonna say initial commit and git push.
How do you get out of the other npm.start?
Oh yeah, you can do Control C. So yeah, the server's basically running forever until you tell it to stop or something crashes. So if you do Control C, you basically kick it out of the terminal. All right, I'm gonna go back real quick to my Heroku. And after enabling automatic deploys, I can go on more, view logs. Let me just show real quick. It says a build started by me on GitHub. So what's essentially happening here is that Heroku detected that somebody pushed onto my GitHub repository. Once it detects that push, it will redeploy my application using the latest code.
I still haven't connected. I'm still on the Heroku page of like connecting it to GitHub,
Yeah.
and it's asking like enable automatic deploys.
Yeah, click on enable automatically.
Okay, and do I select wait for CI to pass?
No, you don't need to click that.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure you have this button selected before you commit your repository.
Oh.
I mean, it's okay if you clicked it, if you've committed it before you click this, but yeah, it just means that you have to manually deploy your first branch by clicking this gray button.
Okay.
But any other future commits will automatically trigger a deployment. So yeah, if you did push your repository onto GitHub before enabling automatic deploys, just make sure you click deploy branch here.
Got it.
And then we can kind of view our app by clicking open app up here. And then we have to wait a bit for it to kind of open. All right, give me 1 sec. Oof, it's not turning on.
Wait, sorry, where's the console that you're looking at?
You mean this page right here?
Yeah.
It should be in more. And then view logs. Oh,
Okay, thank you.
something crashed. Let me. Oh, sorry, my bad. Port should be in full caps. My bad. This is my fault. Process.env.port. Port should be in full caps. So, change port to full caps. And then let's just make a new commit. Sorry, this is my fault. And then I'm going to say updated port. And then I'm going to push this. And then Heroku will detect this change and then automatically redeploy. But yeah, make sure line 3 is a capitalized port. Yeah, so package.json file, when you create an npm project, so when you do npm init, yeah, make sure you add this start script to your scripts section in this JSON file. This key value pair start, and then node, and then index.js, and then make sure you add a comma at the end. So basically what this means is that in our terminal, when we run npm start, it will automatically run this script right here. And yeah, this is just a convention that people use to say this is how I start my npm project, just npm start. Because this function here might not necessarily be the same for another node project.
Hey, Newton, so what did you just do before that to fix the
port,
the Heroku not adding?
Heroku
not loading. Sorry, not loading.
Oh yeah, sorry. The port environmental variable should actually be in capitalized letters. So it's not lowercase. I had it initially as under lowercase port. It should be uppercase port. And then yeah, this value is provided by Heroku. Yeah, sorry, this is my fault. All right, so if I go back to Heroku and I kind of refresh this, okay, now it's working. So basically, let me just quickly go over. Do you need to do that if you use some other web server? You typically do want to have a start script, because by convention, people will start your app by just typing in npm start. In a lot of scripts that you'll see, they're not gonna. I mean, you can kind of specify in your README as well, but npm start is kind of the conventional way to start a node project. If you use another web server, oh yeah, so sorry. On Heroku, just make sure you click open app, which is to the left of your more button. So when you click on open app, it'll open up your URL for your app. But yeah, if you use another web server, typically you'll also have to include a start script no matter what. The only kind of exception to this is that if you use React before, React does have node components in it, but it doesn't work the same way because React does have its own server. And it does have its own scripts as well. And then you'll notice that if you have used React before, you still start a React app using npm start. And then this function is still defined in your package.json file if you were to use a React app. So yeah, typically you'll want to have something defined just as a way to start your program easily. Okay, so does anybody need more time or does anybody not have this working? But essentially what we just did was we connected our GitHub repository. So this is our code. We have a way to run it locally by using npm start. And when we run this, it will run on localhost port 3000 on our local computer. But on Heroku, and on top of that, we connected our GitHub repository onto Heroku. So any changes that we make to our master branch will automatically be deployed on Heroku using their pipeline system. And then when we click on open app, this is how we view our app. Okay, so let's actually build another endpoint using post. So let's just say insert endpoint. And then what we can do is we can add a new post endpoint by saying app.post, and then let's make the URL insert. And then yeah, we need this res thing again. It's kind of hard to explain why we need this, but basically for every route that you write, you will have to include these two things, arrow and then these curly braces. Okay, so here's the goal. We want to post some data in JSON to this endpoint, and then we want to add it to an array. So right below our port, let's actually create a new array. So let's just call this array of people, and then make it an empty array. And this is the syntax for that. So const people equals to empty array. So I know it says const, but we can still make modifications to people as long as we don't redeclare what people is. Like as long as we don't reassign people, we can still make modifications to people. So insert here, let's just say like people.push, which is basically how we insert data. And then let's just add your name. I'm just gonna say Alex for now. And then to say okay, what we do is res.send status 200. And then yeah, I'll kind of make this a bit more complicated. But for now, what we're doing is we're saying if we make a post request to this endpoint, we're adding Alex to this people array, and then we're sending status 200, which means okay. So if basically you hit an endpoint and then the endpoint tells you status 200, you can kind of assume that everything went well. And then I'm going to make a change to our get endpoint up here as well. Instead of console.logging and sending hello world, I'm actually going to say res.json and then people. And what this will do is it will actually take my people array, turn it into a JSON, and then write it onto our screen. So let me run this. Yeah, and thanks again, Jenny. So let's go back to Chrome. Let me just, so I started my local server. So I'm not gonna push anything for now, but when I'm done, we'll have all these changes up on Heroku. If I go on to localhost 3000, you might see something like this, an empty square bracket. And this is perfect because our people array is currently empty. There's nothing in it. So how do we insert a person? So there are a few ways to run post requests, but like a really popular way that people use is they use this program called Postman. And yeah, I mean, if you do like web development or like you're making APIs, this is a good program to download. It's called Postman. Yeah, I should have mentioned this in the beginning as well. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, if you can, you should try to download this because it allows you to make HTTP requests using a GUI as opposed to writing everything out. Like it just makes writing HTTP requests pretty easily. So let me try to, yeah. So when you open Postman for the first time, and I know people are still downloading it right now, but you'll notice on the bottom left, it says skip and go to the app. So I'm going to click that button. The raw parsed icon. Oh yeah, I'm using a plugin on my Google Chrome to kind of parse JSON files or JSON output so that I can easily see it. But raw is basically what you'll be seeing it as. So they kind of like condense everything so that there's no like blank spaces in between the values. Because when you have a program read this, yeah, this is a pretty good output. And yeah, if you are comfortable using curl, you can try to use curl. But yeah, you'll see Postman kind of recommended a lot in tutorials. Okay, so in Postman, here's how I would make a request. So I would just click new, for example. I'll click new, request, and I'm going to say makers test. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click new collection down here. And so I want to make a post request to the endpoint that I just made. So it would be http://localhost port 3000/insert. So if I click on send, you'll notice that I see OK in my terminal below with the status of 200. And this is exactly what I sent from my code over here on line 17. So presumably this worked. And what happened was that when I access this endpoint using a post request, it will actually push Alex into my people array, which basically just means I'll append Alex into my people array. So now this array people has Alex in it. And so if I refresh my main endpoint, that prints out this entire array, which is just localhost 3000. If I refresh this, Alex is going to show up in my endpoint. So if I click on raw, Alex will be here.
Can you show me how to do that request again? Sorry.
Do you have Postman downloaded?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna just recreate this. So on home, on the bottom left, you can just hit skip and go to the app if you don't want to create an account. And then there's a lot going on, but you want to find new towards like the left half. So once you click on new, just click on request, like a basic request. And for the request type, let's just call it Makers Test. And then you have to select a collection or a folder. So I just hit new collection. Or you can create a collection and then you can just call it like tests. So yeah, you'll basically just want to kind of be able to click save to test. So just add it to a collection. And then you'll be given like this screen. You'll be brought to the screen where you can make requests. And what we'll want to do is over here, we can type in this, we can specify the type of request. So get and post are the two most common, but there are like a bunch of other types of requests as well. But when you work with APIs, you typically only use get and post. Sometimes put and delete as well. But yeah, so make sure you click post and then type in the request URL. So our URL to insert Alex into our array is just localhost port 3000/insert. And then the way we know this is because in our Express app, in our code, on line 15, this is where we have it. It's basically saying this is a post endpoint. So only accept post and requests to this URL, so /insert, and then run this code. And then send status basically means when I'm done with this code on top, this is what I want to tell the user. Everything's okay. 200 means okay. And then we're simulating that right here because it's hard to simulate post requests without going into the terminal or like actually writing up a form. So Postman does that easily for us. And we can click on send. And then we get our output. It says okay. So if I just click send a few more times, every time I click send, we're making a separate post request to this URL. And then if I refresh this page, Alex will be added multiple times for every time that I hit send. And then if I click on raw, this is probably what you'll see. I'm using a plugin to kind of make it look nice because, yeah, when you work with APIs a lot, yeah. All right, does anybody have any questions so far? About like any stuff of this process? I know there's like a lot going on, but yeah, let me open up chat. Did you include your host up here? So yeah, make sure you have two things done. Make sure you included the port, so :3000. That's the first step. The second step is in your terminal, make sure you have this app running. So make sure you type in npm start to run your code and start the web server. Because if your server doesn't run, application cache is not defined. Application cache is not defined. Okay, I can take a look at that, but let me actually like try to fit the entire code in here. So this is all the code I have. Yeah, you just make sure you double check it. And yeah, like HTTP 200 literally means okay. Okay, so let's actually commit all of this onto GitHub. So let's say git commit added insert endpoint and git push it. And then, yeah, I know this is supposed to end at 7, but there is a bit more I'd like to go through. So if you are able to stick around, we'll learn how to like add specific things into our people array. But for now, let's actually move on to that. So yeah, after the git push, Heroku will automatically redeploy this app with this insert endpoint. So we can kind of assume it's working. All right, cool. So let's actually be able to accept inputs. So if you have Postman, oh wait, so for Express to accept JSON inputs, there's 2 lines of code that we need to write. At the very top, on line 4, we have to define app.use and then express.json. So this is a bit of a complex feature of Express or like a lot of web frameworks called middleware. But essentially, it's allowing us to use extra functionality within our Express app. And it's kind of like an opt-in feature. So it means like, okay, whenever we can, parse everything as a JSON. And then there is one more thing that we have to add, which is app.use express.url encoded, and then brackets, curly braces, extended equals to true. So yeah, it's kind of hard to explain what these two lines are doing. But if we are sending JSON back and forth between our app and Express, or sorry, our browser and Express, we have to include these two lines of code to enable like JSON support for Express to be able to like parse the JSON. Okay, so make sure you have these two lines of code. And then now in our insert route, let's actually change it a little bit. Let's define a new constant and call it like const person name is equal to, and then req.body dot person name. So what we're doing is we're saying, look, and then yeah, and then on people.push, instead of hard coding Alex, let's actually throw in this variable in here. Okay, let me break down what's going on. So when we make a post request to this endpoint, what Express is going to do is look into this body of the JSON that's being sent. So in the body of the request, and then find a key, find the value of the key of person name, and then push that person name into your people array. So yeah, let me just kind of move everything here. Yeah, and then this is all the code that I need. And then back on Postman, there are two things that we need to do. So yeah, let me just go over this and then I'll show the code again. But under headers, we have to add two headers. The first key is accept, and the second key is sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, the second key is content transfer encoding, I believe. Yeah, I need to check this. Sorry, this is my bad. Okay, so for value, just type in application/JSON. Yeah, sorry, if this doesn't work, I have to go double check it. Oh, sorry, it's content type. My bad, it's content type. So in Postman, yeah, make sure you click on the headers tab and then add a key and add two key value pairs. The first key is accept. The second key is content type. And then they both have a value of application/JSON. So what this will let us do is within Postman, we can send like basic JSON data. Okay, so moving on. Once you have this set up, back in body, we can click on raw, and we can just type in some JSON right here. So I can say person name and give it like some value, and I'll just add my name. And then, oh yeah, person name has to be in double quotes as well. And then if I hit send, oh, whoops. Oh, sorry, I stopped my server. Make sure your server's on after making these changes. Yeah, sorry, I know I'm going a little bit fast right now, but I'll kind of go back and explain a bit. So now that I sent in my name, if I refresh this page, you'll notice that I added myself to this people array. Okay, so let me go back to my code. This is the code that I had. To enable JSON, to allow Express to read in JSON inputs, these are the two lines that I put in. And then the other change I made was I defined a new constant called person name in this endpoint. And to access that name, I say req.body.person name. So this is grabbing it from that JSON. And then I'm pushing it into my peoples array. And then I'm sending it the OK. Okay, so on Postman, yeah, so once you have that set up on Postman, click on headers at the top. So on the same page, click on headers. And for the two key value pairs that you need to add, the first one's accept, and the second one is content-type.